Ethan Cole was found staggering alone on a freezing country road, but it was his missing mother, Claire, whose carefully planted clues and sudden disappearance turned a simple rescue into one of Red Hollow's most haunting mysteries. A cold autumn evening draped the quiet town of Red Hollow in a restless hush, the kind of hush that carries secrets. Mist clung to the edges of the road as the last threads of daylight faded behind the pine trees. A patrol car cruised along County Road 17, its headlights cutting through the fog. Officer Riley, weary from a long shift, almost missed the small shape moving at the shoulder of the road. At first it looked like an animal, a stray dog perhaps, but as the beams swept closer, the outline of a child emerged. The figure trudged forward unsteadily, each step heavy as though his tiny body carried a weight far beyond his years. The boy couldn't have been more than 11. His thin jacket hung loosely around his shoulders, far too light for the biting chill. Mud clung to his shoes, the laces trailing and soaked. His hair was tangled, plastered to his forehead with a dampness that might have been sweat or dew. Scratches lined his pale face, small cuts across his hands hinting at a struggle with brambles or rough terrain. He didn't wave for help or call out. He just kept walking, eyes fixed on the dark road ahead, as if he had been doing this for days and no longer knew how to stop. When the patrol car slowed to a crawl beside him, he did not flinch. There was no spark of relief, no fear, only a hollow gaze that seemed to pass right through the world around him. Officer Riley stepped out, his boots crunching on the gravel shoulder. The boy simply turned his head, lips parted slightly but silent, his breath visible in the cold. He didn't run, he didn't cry, he stood still as if waiting for someone to decide what happened next. Closer inspection revealed a thin bracelet on his wrist, scuffed and bent but still legible under the grime. The small metal tag bore a name, Ethan Cole. Alongside the name was a medical symbol and a note about his developmental disability. The sight of it sent a ripple of alarm through the officer. This was no random wanderer. This was a child who required care, a child who had been missing long enough for hunger and exhaustion to dull his senses. Even more unsettling was the absence of a missing person alert. Dispatch confirmed there had been no recent reports matching Ethan's description. No frantic parents calling, no neighbors spreading the word. It was as though the boy had vanished from a world that didn't notice he was gone. His clothes were damp and streaked with dirt, suggesting nights spent outside. The scuffs on his shoes told a story of miles traveled on foot. Whatever had driven him onto that lonely road had kept him moving despite the cold and the dark. The officer wrapped a blanket around Ethan's shoulders and guided him into the car. The boy made no resistance, his eyes unfocused yet strangely calm. Behind them, the road stretched into a silent horizon, and somewhere beyond that darkness lay the unanswered question of why an 11-year-old had been left to wander alone for so many days without a single voice calling him home. The address linked to Ethan's bracelet led officers to the far end of Willow Lane, a quiet cul-de-sac where every house looked as though it belonged on a postcard. Neatly trimmed hedges lined the sidewalks, porch lights glowed warmly against the growing dusk, and wind chimes tinkled softly in the breeze. From the outside, nothing about the neighborhood suggested trouble. Yet, as the patrol car turned onto the lane, an uneasy feeling settled over the team. The house registered to Ethan, and his mother stood at the very end, slightly apart from the others, its windows dark despite the early evening. The two-story home looked tidy at first glance, with its white siding and a porch swing that moved gently in the wind. But as the officers approached, small details hinted at neglect. The mailbox overflowed with letters, some marked urgent. The garden beds were scattered with fallen leaves that hadn't been cleared despite the season. A faint smell of damp earth drifted from the backyard, carrying a chill that didn't match the otherwise peaceful street. When they knocked, no footsteps answered, no light flickered on inside. The silence behind the door stretched uncomfortably long, broken only by the soft creak of the porch boards under their weight. Finding the front door locked, they circled to the back, where a single door leading into the kitchen stood slightly ajar. The air that escaped was cool and stale, carrying the scent of dust and something faintly metallic. Inside, the house appeared frozen in time. A dining table sat half-set, plates of food congealed and gray as though dinner had been interrupted days earlier. A cup of tea rested on the counter, the liquid evaporated to a sticky ring. There were no signs of forced entry, no shattered windows, no splintered locks, only a strange emptiness that felt heavier with every step. Upstairs, the search revealed a child's bedroom. The walls were covered with cheerful wallpaper dotted with small stars, but the toys scattered across the floor seemed untouched for days. A single bed stood neatly made, its blanket pulled tight as though awaiting its owner's return. School books lay open on a desk beside crayons and half-finished drawings. It was a space meant for comfort, yet the air felt wrong, as though the laughter that once filled it had been abruptly cut off. Officers checked closets and storage spaces, but found no trace of Ethan's mother, Claire Cole, no purse, no phone, no suitcase. Only her shoes rested by the door, the kind someone would slip on for a quick errand, suggesting she hadn't planned to be gone long. Neighbors offered little help when questioned. Some said they hadn't seen Claire for nearly a week, while others claimed the curtains had remained closed for days. None remembered hearing any disturbance, no arguments, no late-night visitors. It was as if the house had quietly emptied itself of life without anyone noticing. As investigators secured the property, a sense of dread deepened. The absence of struggle only sharpened the mystery. Somewhere in this perfectly ordinary neighborhood, a mother had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a child who had wandered the cold nights alone, and a home that whispered of an interrupted story no one was yet able to understand. The deeper investigators searched the house, the more unsettling the discoveries became. What at first seemed like a simple case of a missing parent began to unfold into something far stranger. Every room carried signs of a life suddenly paused. Drawers were left half open, as if someone had rifled through them in haste. A faint smell of mildew clung to the air, mixed with the dry scent of paper. In the small study near the kitchen, a locked desk drawer caught their attention. After carefully prying it open, they found a stack of bank receipts bundled together with an elastic band. Each slip recorded large cash withdrawals made within the last 10 days, amounts far too significant to be ordinary expenses. The dates lined up with the days leading up to Ethan's disappearance, suggesting deliberate preparation for something urgent. Among the papers lay a worn family photo album. Its cover was scuffed, corners frayed, and pages slightly warped as though it had been handled repeatedly. Inside were snapshots of Ethan and his mother in happier times, birthday parties, trips to the park, lazy afternoons in the backyard. Yet, as the pages turned, a quiet unease settled in. No father appeared in any of the photographs. There were no grandparents, no relatives, no close family friends. Every picture centered on Claire and Ethan alone, a world of two captured in frame after frame. Tucked behind one of the final photographs, investigators found a folded piece of paper taped to the back of the page. In neat but hurried handwriting, it read, "If anything happens, follow the signs." The message was cryptic and its placement deliberate. It felt less like a casual note and more like a warning meant to be discovered. Searching for its meaning, officers began to re-examine the property with fresh eyes. Outside, the backyard stretched into a narrow strip of woods that separated the house from a neighboring field. At first glance it appeared unremarkable, littered with fallen leaves and branches from recent autumn winds. But when flashlights swept across the ground, small wooden stakes became visible beneath the layers of damp foliage. Each stake carried a tiny arrow carved into its surface, pointing toward the tree line. Following the trail, investigators found more of these markers, each hidden just enough to escape a casual glance. The arrows formed a winding path leading deeper into the woods. It was as if someone had taken careful time to create a route, not for adults but for a child to follow. The stakes were spaced at intervals small enough for short legs to navigate, and their carved arrows were simple and unmistakable. The realization struck with a quiet chill. This was not the work of a stranger. Whoever set the path knew Ethan well enough to guide him in a way he could understand. The question now was why such a trail existed at all. Was it a desperate escape plan, a secret game, or a final act of protection from a threat still unseen? The careful craftsmanship of each marker suggested urgency without panic, a silent instruction left behind for a purpose only the missing mother could explain. The wooden arrows waited in the shadows, holding a message that investigators could only begin to decipher, a message that hinted at danger moving closer than anyone had yet imagined. The investigation widened beyond the quiet neighborhood as the trail of clues pushed officers to examine every movement Claire Cole made in the days before her disappearance. Detectives began reviewing bank transactions, security footage, and traffic cameras, hoping to catch even a fleeting glimpse of where she might have gone after leaving the house. It was during one of these long, late-night reviews that a single piece of footage stood out. A grainy security camera at a gas station on the outskirts of Red Hollow showed Claire tonight's before Ethan was found. She stood at an ATM, shoulders tense, eyes darting toward the entrance as though expecting someone to walk in at any moment. Her hands trembled slightly as she withdrew a large amount of cash, stuffing the bills into a worn canvas bag. What unsettled investigators more than her anxious posture was the man standing a few feet away. Dressed in a dark hoodie with the hood pulled low over his face, he hovered near the edge of the frame, neither approaching nor leaving. He didn't interact with Claire, yet his presence seemed too precise to be accidental. When Claire finally turned to leave, the man shifted subtly, keeping his distance but clearly watching. The time stamp on the footage placed the encounter just hours before Ethan likely began his journey through the woods. Not long after this discovery, another clue surfaced. Claire's car, a blue sedan registered under her name, was located by a maintenance worker early in the morning. It had been abandoned near a bend in the Red River, parked neatly as though she had stepped out for a short walk and never returned. The doors were unlocked, the keys left in the ignition, and the interior carried no signs of a struggle. A forensic sweep revealed no fingerprints other than Claire's and Ethan's, leaving investigators with more questions than answers. Why would a cautious mother, already showing signs of fear, leave her car in such an exposed location with cash withdrawals in her possession? Inside the glove compartment, officers discovered a small GPS device. The data history revealed repeated visits to a single destination, a storage unit on the edge of a neighboring town. Detectives wasted no time obtaining a warrant. When the metal door of the unit rolled upward, the beam of a flashlight revealed a tidy but unsettling collection of belongings. Boxes of personal documents were stacked with deliberate care. Passports, medical records, and photographs were sealed inside plastic bags as if prepared for sudden departure. Among them lay a spiral-bound journal, its pages filled with hurried handwriting. The journal chronicled weeks of escalating fear. Claire wrote about receiving anonymous notes on her doorstep, seeing the same unfamiliar car parked near the house at odd hours, and noticing figures lingering in the shadows during her grocery runs. She referred repeatedly to someone she called the Watcher, a name she underlined in several entries. Her words described a presence that seemed to follow her every move, a pressure that grew heavier each day. Reading through the pages, investigators sensed a woman torn between panic and determination, someone trying to stay ahead of a threat she believed was closing in. The journal ended abruptly, the final entry dated the very night she was last seen, leaving a haunting silence where her next thoughts should have been. As investigators sifted through the final pieces of evidence, the story of Claire Cole's disappearance became even more tangled. The man in the gas station footage was eventually identified through cross-referenced vehicle registrations and a faint reflection of his license plate caught on another camera. His name belonged to a former neighbor from Claire's old apartment complex, a man with a documented history of harassment. Years earlier, he had briefly dated Claire, though the relationship ended after only a few weeks. Police records revealed restraining orders and prior complaints of stalking that stretched back nearly a decade. He had recently been released from a short prison sentence for violating one of those orders, a fact that sent a jolt of urgency through the investigative team. Detectives moved quickly to locate him. They found the man living in a small rental house several miles away, where he calmly opened the door and claimed complete ignorance of Claire's situation. He admitted to seeing her once or twice in town, but denied any recent contact. His alibi for the night Claire vanished proved unexpectedly solid. Time-stamped receipts, witness statements, and surveillance footage placed him at a late-night diner across town during the critical hours. Despite the chilling coincidences, there was nothing to hold him on. The shadow of suspicion lingered, but the law required proof that simply wasn't there. With the most obvious suspect ruled out, attention shifted back to Claire's own actions. The careful withdrawal of cash, the storage unit filled with documents, the hidden wooden markers in the woods all pointed to a woman preparing for something drastic. Investigators began to consider the possibility that Claire had orchestrated her disappearance to protect Ethan from a threat only she understood. Her journal entries painted a picture of relentless fear, but fear can blur reality. Was the watcher a real person, or the product of a mind driven to desperation by anxiety and isolation? Despite exhaustive searches of the Red River and the surrounding woods, no trace of Claire surfaced. Divers combed the water, cadaver dogs swept through acres of forest, and helicopters scanned the countryside, but the landscape kept its secrets. The only physical evidence remained the trail of wooden arrows guiding Ethan away from the house, a silent path that suggested careful planning rather than panic. The stakes were positioned with the precision of someone who believed they might never return, someone who needed to leave behind a lifeline for a child who could not fend for himself. Months passed with no breakthrough. Eventually, Ethan was placed with foster parents in a nearby town, where he began a slow, fragile recovery. He never spoke about the nights he spent wandering or how he managed to follow the path through the woods. Whether from inability or unwillingness, the details of his journey stayed locked inside him. The case officially remained open but inactive, a file of unanswered questions and faint leads. To this day, no one knows whether Claire escaped to start a new life, fell victim to an unseen predator, or vanished for reasons that defy explanation. The arrows in the woods still remain, weathered but standing, silent witnesses to a mother's desperate love and a mystery that continues to haunt Red Hollow.